All right. If I did not say earlier, it's been one of those days, so forgive me. My name is Garrett. I'm one of the pastors here. Oh man, that was a great worship service. I gotta be honest. The songs were just wonderful, and it's great to see you here. If you are joining online, I'd like to welcome you, and if you ever are interested in joining us, just come on in. We've got plenty of back row seats that everybody else wants to sit on, so we'll make you guys move forward, and then, okay. I love these Instagram posts that you find where they show you what they have in Japan that we don't have here. Okay, I love these. And some person sees whatever the phenomenon is, and they hurriedly pull their phone out, and they do a hand video recording of this thing, and they have on the top of the video the giant words that says, "Japan is living in the future." And it can be something like, high-tech toilets or vending machines that serve hot meals or umbrellas, whatever you're looking for at the time. Or maybe, it's a super fast, bullet train with upholstered seats, and the trains run on time. Or they're going, "Look at this! It's an amazing thing! I can't believe it! I can't believe it!" And we look at our phones with our face like up against the glass, like we imagine the orphans and Oliver Twist going, "Please, sir, I want a magic toilet." And we just look at them and go, "I can't believe it! I can't believe what they have that we don't have." They're living in the future. It's funny what we can focus on and think, man, everything must be just clicking. But did you know that there's another way that Japan is living in the future? That they're actually showing us what the future may hold for a lot of Western, modernized, urbanized nations hold. They are in a crisis of community in Japan. They are in a crisis of aloneness in Japan. In fact, one Japanese social scientist said the basic concept of family in Japan is dead. They're so wandering into the individual moment of their lives, and they're struggling with a crisis of community, and it's leading to really sad things like this phenomenon that they've given a name to called kodokushi, which means, roughly translated, lonely deaths. People who find themselves living alone, existing alone, being alone, and ultimately dying alone, and the people don't know about it. They're not found until some rent person comes saying, "Hey, why aren't you paying rent?" Because their savings account, their automatic, ran out of money, so they can't pay for rent anymore, or the neighbors smell the body. And one of the bizarre, real things that has happened in this nation is they've had this new economy of these cleaning services that clean up after these people who've died in their apartments. And they're usually hoarders, or they're holding on to every light bill and everything. And sometimes they have to clean up after the smell of these bodies. And one company named themselves with the ominous name, Next. "We'll get the apartment ready for the next lonely person to come in here. Don't you worry about it. We're going to do it." And what we're seeing is that people are living in the future, living alone, with no family and no community, and no one to notice if they're not there. And the future is grim. The future is not what we should be running headlong into. The modern Western world, which Japan is a part of, is the first culture in the history of the world where people would decide to live lives alone. It is the first time in the history of the world where that was a thing that people would even think of. But not only that, it's also the first culture in the history of the world where people could actually live alone. They could actually be afforded a life where they just spend their entire lives completely by themselves. And it used to be your family made up so much sense of the world for you, right? Does anybody in here other than me choose their career based on what their dad did? Anyone? I'm the only one? Okay. Yeah, okay, there we go. A couple. Yeah, it's funny how that works. Even when we don't have to, we still kind of do it sometimes. But it used to be, if your dad was a baker, you're a baker. If your dad was a smith, you'd be a smith. If your dad grew up in this town, you're going to grow up in this town. That's just it just made sense. My people always did it. We always were here, and we did this. And did that world have problems? Sure, it had problems. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why we don't really want to be in a traditional society. But The individualistic, modern, urbanized world has its problems too. One where community has a lot of work to do to get anywhere with us. There were a lot of promises that came with the modernization and urbanization of the world we live in. A lot of them good, and a lot of them were even made good on. Are there any women in the room who can read? Yep, yeah, there we go. That's one of them, all right? You can drive. You can do what you want. You can pursue the career you want. You can pursue the dreams you want to pursue. These are part of the things that the modern Western world gave us, and they're good things. But here's a case in point. When we moved to Holly Springs, which is south of Raleigh, we're in the Raleigh area, we had these friends in our neighborhood, and we were at their house, sitting around a fire behind their house, and we were just talking. I'm trying to get to know them. How are you doing? What do you do? I said, what do you do? And he said, I'm a nurse at Duke Hospital. Now, Duke and UNC are all over the place in the Triangle. So I go, oh, you mean the one they just built here? And he goes, no, the one at Duke University. And I go, what? That's like a 50-minute drive. Like, what are you doing? He goes, it's in the Triangle. I go, what? But that's urbanization. You find a house where you find a house. You find a job where you find a job. You find a church where you find a church. And none of these things are necessarily tied to the other. None of them are necessarily connected in any way. And so you and I have this day every week where we come together, and this is where we go to church. But this is not necessarily connected to where you go to work or where you go to school or anything else. And they are just disconnected from each other. And it has made community very difficult. And it has left us a people who are kind of fragmented, atomized, and sometimes alone. And it is into this society that we're going to be reading from the book of 1 Peter today. And I think that what Peter has to say is so timely to our world, our fragmented, separated world, where he's going to speak these words. You were not a people, but now you are the people of God. I think sometimes we can listen to the Bible or hear people talk about the Bible, or we think about the Bible and we go, well, I'm sure that really, really was helpful at one point in time. I'm sure that was really, really helpful for people who just really were wanting that or something like that. But I think this idea right here is more profound for our day and age than it has ever been in the last 2,000 years. I think this one line would be more of a sip of cold water to a thirsty person now than ever in history. We wander through our cities and we wander through our worlds and we wander and we go, what am I doing here? We end up with a crisis of faith and a crisis of identity and a crisis of community and a crisis of family. And we go, what is going on? And then Peter comes along and he says, listen, God is building a community. He is building a people. He is building a group that he calls his own. And once you were no part of it, but now you are part of the people of God. You have a home when you once did not have a home. You can have a community where once you did not have a community. And we're starting this series called Community, and I promise it's not going to be 5 weeks of me going, will you please join a Bible study? Can you just get in a life group, please? I'm going to do that today, but I want it to be broader than that. I want us to think differently about what are these things, these communities that we think about and we interact with. And I want us to ask questions about what does this fact that Jesus brings us into his family, how does that change us? And how does it change how we do things like go to work? How does it change how we do things like live in a family or in a neighborhood? How does it change the way we live with our physical neighbors around us? How does this church, as it's shaped into the image of Jesus, then change and interact with the community around us? Last month, we did a series called Reaching the World for Jesus. It was about evangelism. And we said evangelism and conversion are kind of two sides of the same coin. Well, this is kind of the other side of the coin from last series, right? We're talking about how to reach the world for Jesus, but how does this church go into our community and reach it and just be faithfully present there? Because here's my point. There's a lot more going on in community, in the communities that we live, work, and play in, than just the fact that we live, work, and play in them. Wherever we find ourselves, that is a place where God has brought us. And now He has someone who's part of His family in that spot. And I believe that God can do amazing things when we live into that kind of thing. If you have your Bibles open up to 1 Peter chapter 2, I have no promises about what's going to be up on the screen, and I think Darren's just laying on the floor back there. So it's just like we're not going to worry about it, okay? I heard snoring. Yeah. So 1 Peter chapter 2. Open up the Bible, and it's going to be great. It's going to be great. I'm glad to. Have I said this yet? I'm glad to see all you guys. I'm very happy right now. I hope you're happy too. Michael's happy. Michael's always happy. Verse 1. Therefore, rid yourselves of all malice and all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, slander, and every kind. And like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation. Now that you have tasted that the Lord is good. As you come to Him, the living stone, rejected by humans, but chosen by God, and precious to Him, you also are like living stones, being built into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, offering special sacrifices, acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Jump down to verse 9. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. Think about that. We did a whole series on the church through Ephesians at the beginning of the year. Just think about what God views you and me as we are part of His church. A chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. That you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul, and live such good lives among the pagans, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day that He visits us. All right. One of the first questions we have to ask is, why is it so hard to have good community? Why is it so hard? And the first point we're going to talk about is that Christians need to have different desires. My point is Christians have different desires, but actually we need to have different desires. We need to aim for different desires. And the longer you're a Christian, the more you realize, man, I still kind of feel like I have a lot of the desires I had before I was a Christian. That's kind of a bummer. And so we need to shape our desires into something else. And so when we ask, why is it that community is so hard to keep going? And now that we're in this atomized time where we can all kind of live our own lives and go our different places, it's even harder. Well, let's look at how we tend to operate. Peter says this, rid yourselves of all malice, all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. Oh, is that it? Is that all that we've got swirling around in our relationships with each other? Malice and deceit? Who's ever looked in the mirror and been like, you know what, you look like a lot of malice today. You know what I mean? You just... Yeah, but we're looking here, we're going, okay, so this is why relationships break down. Because this is what's wanting to pop up in between us. This is what's causing all those little snide remarks. This is what's causing all those little conversations that you probably shouldn't have had, and all these little moments in between you where you go, man, this is why you can't be happy when your friends have success, because of envy. And listen to what Peter says in verse 11. He says this, abstain from sinful desires. They're not just bad things out there that you should not do. They're desires. They're things that you actually kind of want to do. You have like this urge and kind of like a longing to kind of reach out for them. Their desires, Peter says. And then he says this, which wage war, not against the world at large, not against the friendship, even though it does. They wage war against your soul. That when you and I engage with this stuff, we leave wounded just like the other person does. And we all know this is true. In fact, it is one of the aspects of being human that drives me crazy. Why do we desire things that are bad for us? Why do we crave things that we know will not be good for us? Why is it this one moment right here does such a great job of drowning out anything beyond it into the future? How many times have you said that thing to your husband or wife? That thing that you just so desperately wanted to say. The thing that they really need to hear. If I don't say it, no one's going to say it. They'll never know about it. And then the moment you say it, you go, oh gosh, that doesn't sit well with me. And you're instantly filled with regret. Why does that happen? Because it's a desire to say something, but it wars against your soul. How many times have we done this? Where we go, oh, I just want to do this one thing, or I just want to go over here, I want to do that. And then I know I shouldn't do it, but it's been a long day, whatever. And we go do it, and we immediately go, gosh, what was I thinking? That is our sinful desires waging war against us. Our motivations are moving towards things that will hurt us. And what Paul said, the book of James says, you better watch your mouth. Be careful what you say. He says, think about what a great forest was set on fire by a tiny spark. All I said was, match. And she, forest fire. We've all seen this, right? All I did was tick. And he, boom, right? We've all seen it. We've all experienced it. And Peter's going, it's time that you get rid of these things from your life. You get rid of these desires out of your life so that your community and your relationships can grow. So that they can grow and be healthy. And he says this, like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk so that you may grow up in your salvation. Take your desires, remove them, and replace them with new ones. Now, we've all seen this happen. It happens, and you can do this. Every one of us, as a child, could not stand the taste of coffee. All we wanted ever was hot chocolate. That's gross. I want hot chocolate. Your mom's like, but that's just a giant cup of sugar and chocolate. You go, yeah, but it's the only thing I can drink. It's all I want. It's all I can't. And then eventually, at some point in your life, you remove that desire and you replace it with coffee. Good, holy, godly, honest coffee right here. And the coffee, and we make sure it's about coffee. We're like, hey, but first coffee and the whole thing. And we have replaced one craving and we've put a new one in its place. Some people just don't have a taste for water. I can't drink it. I can't drink it. It's just, I got to have something else. And you know what? There have been people they have developed for themselves a desire and ability to just drink water. I'm going to drink water now. They developed that desire in the craving for it. And this can happen. And what happens, and Peter says this, he says, the way that you can remove these other desires and start craving pure spiritual milk so that you can grow up in your salvation, the way you can do that is by remembering that the Lord is good. Verse 2 and 3 says this, now that you have tasted that the Lord is good. Now that you have seen these moments where you're going, oh, that's what God called me to. And I was actually obedient to it. And I did it. And it was great. The relationship grew. The friendship developed. No one left hurt. This is what Jesus is calling me to. Oh, this is so much better. And Peter's going, now that you've been there, now that you've tasted and seen that the Lord is good, now that you know that what he's calling you to is good things for good outcomes, why don't you continue to crave that more? And so often, you and I continue to walk into our sinful desires, even though we've already tasted them and we've already seen that they are bad. We've already felt the regret that comes along with it. We've already felt the shame. We've already felt the experience of going, what was I thinking? How could I do that? And even though we've tasted and seen that it is bad, we continue to walk in that direction. And Peter's going, you've got to get rid of that. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Taste and see that the Lord is good. And walk into his grace. And it will change the way you have relationships. It'll change the way you have community. It'll change the way you live married in your house. It'll change the way you parent your kids. It'll change the way you have people over for dinner. It will change. Because Christians aim to develop different desires than the world around us, or even what we used to have. And secondly, the way we get this is by understanding that we live in a different reality. We talked about this a little bit in communion. Peter brings it up. He says, there's this stone, there's this thing that was just out there and is available to people, and the workers rejected it. They go, that's just a crummy stone. It's not going to ever work. It's not going to be worthwhile. And then they go, no. That was actually the cornerstone. That was actually the foundation of everything. You just walked away from it. And so, as we begin to think through, what is this goodness of God that we have? What is this goodness of God that we can live into, we can understand that he's good, so we can then want to obey him as we move forward? Well, the goodness of God comes from the fact that even though he was rejected and people could have walked away from him forever, he never quit pursuing us. He never quit reaching out to us. He never quit chasing us down. He never quit pursuing us in developing his plan until one day it led to him on a cross, on Calvary, dying for the sins of the world. And even though people rejected him, he's offering to be the foundation for those who come to him. And it says this, because once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once we were wandering, once we were lost, once we were left out in the cold, and he has brought us in to be part of his family. When we started a church campus in Holly Springs, Derek and I, he led worship for us a couple weeks ago, we had this prayer night right before launch Sunday. We all got together, all the people who were part of the launch team, we got together and prayed. And we just kind of went around the circle and people started praying. And they would just start sharing about how they ended up here. And they would pray about what God's done for them so far and how they believe he's leading them something good in the future. And I just started, I did this, okay, guys? I promise. I don't do this often. I opened my eyes during the prayer. And, okay. Well, I guess you're all opening your eyes too? All right, I go, okay. No more closing our eyes, I guess. And I just started looking around the circle at all the people who are now part of this group starting a church. And I knew some of their stories, and I was learning other people's stories, and I just started looking around going, wow, I can't believe the sort of tale and journey that brought this person to be in this room right now. And how this couple over here kind of had their wandering tale that had them end up here right now. And how me and my family ended up out of Savannah and into Raleigh, and how Derek and his family got there. And I just started looking around, and I started seeing all the different stories and all the different strains and all the different pathways that led into this one body of church. Not just the church at large, every church in the world. No, just the one church. And I could do the same here. I could look at all the people that I know, and I could say, wow, how that person ended up here is amazing. How that person ended up here is amazing. And what you realize as you start looking around and learning people's stories and hearing where they came from and how they ended up here and all that sort of stuff, what you learn is that you actually don't have the ability to build this church. I don't have the ability to build this church. I don't have the ability to say, hey, I'm going to go grab these people from over here and those people from over there and just throw them all in a room and say, now we are a church together. No, God has brought us together. God has invited us in. God has reached his hands into our lives and said, come over here, come with me, come and taste that I am good, come see that I have good things for you. And every church anywhere in the world is a church that is completely made up of people that almost none of us would have ever met each other if it were not for the fact that we ended up as a part of this church. I thought, man, that is amazing. It's amazing when you just stop for a moment and think, what is it that God's truly doing as we gather and we live and we act as a body together? Well, here's what he's doing. He's taking you and you and me. He's saying, you're a living stone. And I'm building you into this spiritual house. And we're being built on the foundation of Jesus Christ. And he's saying, now that you're part of this, because you're not just a dead stone, you're not just a rock, but you're like a living stone, you can walk out into the world. You can go to the places where you work and you live and you eat and you play and you have neighbors and you have coworkers and you have schools and you have teachers and you have students and you have all these people, and you can be someone who's bringing the goodness of God with you. You can be someone who's making what happens in our community just a little different, because when you go, you bring the cornerstone with you. And you realize that though I was once a person who was just a sinner, overrun by desires that warred against, that hurt my own self, much less the people around me. And you see that now he has brought you into the family of God. And he's saying, you are a chosen people. You are a royal priesthood. You are a holy nation. And you're God's special possession. And none of that was stuff you could do for yourself. And here's the deal. As we learn to truly live into that reality, we will begin to shape ourselves more and more into the image of God. And quite frankly, as our theme of the year goes, friendship with God, friendship with each other, this building up that Jesus has in store for us can't just, it requires time. It requires community. It requires us being together. More than just gather. I'm glad you gather on Sunday. I hope you leave encouraged. I hope it gives you something you can work on and it gives you the courage and the mindset for the week. I hope all that is true, because I think it is. But we also need to find ways where we can spend time together in Bible studies and in serving, and in ways that we can allow time with God and time with each other to change how we operate and change how we live and change how we see each other. And you know what? As a church, we have several opportunities. We have opportunities to serve. We have opportunities to have Bible studies. We have opportunities to do all kinds of things. Mine and Megan's Bible studies are starting back not this week, but next week. The men's group is always going on Wednesday nights. If you're interested, we want to get you connected. But what we really want is for each of us to find a way to live out our lives in the goodness of God. And let that shape us as we go into our communities, into our homes, into our families, so that that goodness can change how our community operates. Because it doesn't have to go. The lives of the people in our world do not have to go the way we're currently heading, where we live alone and act alone and work alone and die alone and everything alone because I'm my own person and everything. It doesn't have to go that way. we can actually be a church that does our little part of making the Winston-Salem, Louisville, Clemens area a community worth being part of. And I pray that you and I will be a part of it.